I forget. Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. We are recording and we'll make sure to have this recording available to you all on our YouTube page, and we'll add a link to that on our peer-to-peer Basecamp as well. But let's go ahead and get started. So just a quick reminder that we extended the reporting deadline to April 30th. This is just because last year, there's still a lot going on. So we just want to make sure that firms have the time to report their portfolios. We have several resources available to you. First, we have these open office hours. The next and last open office hour is April 13th from 3:30 to 4:30 Eastern. Feel free to book an appointment with us. We have 20-minute calls that you can book with us. If you have questions about a specific project or something about the 2030 commitment overall, we're happy to chat with you guys and help you out. And then we just wrapped up the Secrets to Success series, which is available on AIU, and that featured firms who met the 2030 targets in 2019. And they talked about how they were able to do that. We have a small firm, a medium-sized firm, and a larger firm session. So you can find those on AIU. If you didn't join live, you can watch them on demand. Oops. Just a quick reminder for what projects you should be adding to the system. Any projects that have that are in an active design phase, anything that includes an HVAC system or a substantial envelope change, and all interiors projects which have a lighting design. So those are kind of the parameters we set. You might not be adding every single project for whatever reason, but we do encourage you to keep a holistic view of your portfolio. Meaning, like, don't just add the projects that look good. And then the last reminder, which a lot of people are getting tripped up on this year because it is a change, just keep an eye on the reporting date when you're adding design data. So make sure it reflects the date that the data was collected, like when the energy model was actually done, instead of the current year or when you added the information. If this says 2021, it won't be pulled into your 2020 portfolio. So make sure to backdate that data if you're adding 2020 information now. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Matt so he can do a walkthrough of how to actually submit your projects super quickly, and then we'll jump into your questions. Like I said, we already got some questions from a few of you in the inbox, so we'll start with those and then we'll take the ones in the chat. So Matt, take it away.
Awesome. So hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
So Paula asked that we specifically cover how to submit a portfolio. So submitting a portfolio does look a little bit different in the new system. And I'm going to show you some enhancements and talk about a couple of major assumptions in place. And then we can get into sort of the meat of what you're doing. So the first thing to understand is that, similar to the old DDX, for those of you who are familiar with it, the portfolio submission is only available to company administrators, and it's accessible from the company tab. So as you've been going through and logging all of your projects so that they accurately reflect, sort of the real-time condition of those projects at the end of 2020, once you have all of that set through your managed projects and you feel comfortable with it, you can click on Submit Portfolio. When you click on Submit Portfolio, it's going to start a 3-step process. First, it's going to ask you to select your reporting year. So we're submitting in March or April for 2020. So this is for the reporting year. So go ahead and select that. There will be a flag if you've already previously submitted a portfolio. So if you wanted to go back for some reason and resubmit your portfolio data from 2019 or 2018, not a super common use case, but something that sometimes comes up. But also for like your current reporting year, if you're going and then you don't think you're going to get some data in by a project team member, and then it's last minute, they're like, oh, I do have it. You can resubmit your portfolio and I'll save over what you had previously saved. That's all this flag is showing. It's just saying, hey, this demo account that we use.
Matt, you muted yourself.
I unmuted myself. I didn't say anything though. I saw it. I got the notice. There we are, guys, live on Zoom. So when you go through, that'll just be like the warning. You can ignore it here, but so you know if you see it, go ahead and click continue. And it's going to pull in your projects. And there are a couple of things to point out on this page. This page is giving you the opportunity to toggle projects in or out of your portfolio, but there's some underlying logic to pre-groom the list and hopefully make it a little bit easier. First, any of your projects that are in an active status, regardless of when their last reporting date was, will be selected by default. The assumption there is that if you're monitoring and maintaining your projects regularly in the system, that projects that are active should still be included. They're part of your portfolio. And it's going to search for a reporting date up through 12/31/2020. So this goes back to what Paula said, why it's really important that your date be in 2020 or earlier if you want to include it in your portfolio. To be more specific about that, if District Squash Club had a value, say concept reported in early 2020, and in the early 2021, maybe last month in February, you added a new design record, the performance, the percent reduction savings that it's pulling in is your 2020 value, even though there's newer data. So that's why it's really important that your date be set to 2020 or earlier. So at the top, you have all of your active projects. They've been selected. You can view more if you like, up to 1,000 per, because it can be a long list. So once you get through the active, the completes will begin. And for the completes, they're by default off, but that's showing all of your projects, so you can pull them in. They are by default sorted by the most recently reported date. So I'm sharing that. So I'm sharing this because some firms will touch every project in 2020, right? Some projects still say, every year we're going to ask our project team to go in and update our projects. And that way you can just go in and say, well, this project was completed in 2020, so I'm going to go ahead and check it into the box, right? You can toggle it in. You can also toggle things out and say, this is still showing as active. It shouldn't be included for whatever reason, and you can pull it out. So that is by default. All of your active projects will be toggled on. Your complete projects will appear underneath it, and they will be in descending order from the most recently reported design phase data going back in time. So that should work in most situations where you have your entire portfolio is in the system and you're tracking it sort of an ongoing basis. Should make that easy. We're looking at ways to improve that still. If you're a firm though that does have everybody touch the project in the calendar year, and you're looking for that date reported as being in the year 2020, I recommend toggling off everything by clicking the select all button and then sorting the date reported from high to low. All of these columns are sortable. When you sort them, you will lose that pre-filter where you have active and then complete by date reported. So just being mindful of that. But then at that point, you can go in and select your projects from 2020, grab those so that it matches sort of whatever you expect it to match. So I'm not going to do them all right now. When you have them toggled however you want them, there's a first box which says I confirm that the snapshot reflects my company's full design portfolio for 2020. Again, as Paula mentioned, that's just saying I'm not cherry picking my projects. That field is required. You do have to check that first box. The second box is optional. I give consent to have AI publish or share my company's PEY reduction publicly. So currently, in the program, we never disclose an individual company's PEY performance, and we never disclose any individual building information. We take that really seriously. That said, we've had a number of firms over the last year reach out and say, it would be great if you could just share the calculation, right? If you could link to it on our directory page where we list and show all of the firms. And we've introduced it as a step toward that end. It's largely to test to see if the market is there. If it's something you're not comfortable with, totally respect that. Just don't check the box. If you do check it and then for some reason change your mind or do it on accident, you can reach out to us and we can take care of it. In any case, once you have that squared away and you have that final checkbox checked and you hit continue, it's going to bring you to step 3, which is confirming that you've submitted your portfolio. The first thing is you'll see a badge. This is a JPEG file you can download. It's also saved to your company resources tile, which I'll show you here in a moment. By default, it's going to pull in the number of years reported. There are some peccadillos here. So if you run into something where it's saying 4th year reporting and you're on your 5th year, give us a call, give us an email. And we'll sort it out and make sure you have the right badge and that we're fixing what's happening in the back end. There are a number of reasons that'll happen, including especially for firms who were submitting in 2010 to 2015 before we had a digital database. So to download that badge, you can click download badge. You can also from the screen download a CSV copy of what's in your portfolio submission. If you want to do manual calculations on it, it'll filter out just the projects that you've included in your submission. So it's all in one place and a resource for you. If you're not interested in doing either of those, if you just feel satisfied that you've submitted, you can click return to portfolio and that'll bring you back to your company page. If at any point you do want to come back and get that CSV or the CSV or the badge, oh, I'm in the wrong tab. It'll be on the company page at the very bottom. There's a company resources and it'll include a copy of your portfolio submission that's timestamped to when you submitted it, as well as your badge, which will update when you go in. And those are visible to employees of your company. You can also go in and delete those files if you don't want them or don't care, or like in this case, where we've submitted the 2020 portfolio multiple times, you can go in and just clear those out as part of record keeping. Ultimately, that comes down to what you and your firm want to do. We just want you to have a receipt of that transaction. While I'm here on the company resource tile, I also want to share that you can add a resource. So if you have an internal protocol on how you all within your company are staffing the 2030 commitment, for example, and you want to upload that, you can do so by clicking add resource, adding a file and a quick description, and it'll post here in your company resources and be visible to users of the DDX. Once you submit your portfolio, you'll be able to filter for it on the reports tab. So on the reports tab, it is pulling information based on the reporting year associated with the project. So when you select 2020, it's going to pull in information. And this information should always match if you go back to that CSV file that's saved on your record. It should match that if you wanted to manually pull out the calculations. We're going to continue to make some improvements on the reports page to try to give you a little bit more utility from it, and are definitely open to feedback on that. But important to understand that the reports tab is linked then to your reporting data. So you won't be able to see 2020 on your reports page until after you've submitted your portfolio report. And that's it. I will share as well before we open up for questions, and I can go through the demo again. We can tackle sort of whatever you want. We are looking at options for those users who do bulk import. We're looking at a way to streamline the system, but right now the process I just walked you through is true for both individuals who are tracking their project data within the DDX natively, as well as those users who are doing bulk import and bringing things in via Excel spreadsheets. We're looking at making some changes to that in the next week and a half or so that will only affect bulk users. So that's submitting a portfolio. I want to really emphasize what Paula said as well around the reporting year. So for the reporting year, a quick spot check. When you're in your managed project on your company side, the days since last reported is showing a countdown to when the last design phase was reported. So as a quick check, I will often, at least in our demo account and when I'm talking to companies, filter from low to high. All of these projects that are hitting like 11, 21, 22, these projects where the most recent design data reported is within the last 80 or so days are going to have a design phase reported in the calendar year 2021. Those projects will not include on your portfolio. So if you have a question about those and you're like, that's wrong, it's fairly easy to switch, particularly if you're in a QA role. You can go into the project, scroll down to the most recent design phase, and just make sure that they're dated. So if this January project really should be included, design phase should have been included back in December, you can click on the 3 dots and click edit and just nudge that back to 12/31 and hit save and go to project. All of the data you had entered for that record will stay the same. You're just pushing that date back to flag. This should be included in calendar year 2020. So that field is really important. And if you're coming back with numbers when you go into your report that feel off, that's probably the source of your issue.
I think that is a great segue into some of the questions that we got in the inbox. Joan specifically, I know you're online, I think, maybe, but you had a question about creating 22 projects that showed up on your portfolio screen. When you went to the submit portfolio screen, you only saw 14 of those. So Matt did go through a couple of the things that might be wrong, such as the reporting date isn't in 2020, it's actually in 2021.
Right.
It wouldn't be pulling in.
And in a case like that, like Joan will follow up with you offline as well. I think it's just a great way to sort of highlight where that challenge comes into play, but we can also follow up with you and schedule one of the one-on-ones to make sure that we're getting under the hood on your project portfolio and that it's doing what it should.
Okay, so what page do I go to double check those 14 bad boys?
Yeah, so the most likely where I would start is by going to the company tab and filtering by days since last reported. It actually kept the filter, which was great. And I would do a spot check. Sorry, it's like spazzing out. I would do a spot check for projects that have been reported within the last 81 days. Okay. Because what it's going to by default try to do is pull a project where the days since last reported is greater than whatever 12/31 was from today, which I think is about 91 days. It'll be about 120 days in when we actually go to submit the portfolio. And I suspect that that's the first point.
I think that's where I've got to do.
The second thing I would look at, and Joan, again, glad to follow up with you, but I think it's a good to hear because we're hearing it from you and others. So I think it's also good to highlight for other folks. When you go in and submit portfolio year 2020, which is where you're probably seeing that default list of 14, perhaps. When you go in here, it's by default selecting your active projects. So the second consideration I would ask is, you think there should be 22, you're seeing 14, that's a difference of, I'm bad with math, 8, thank you. Were those 8 projects complete, right? If those 8 projects were complete, then those are gonna should fall just below the pre-checks, and you'll just wanna toggle those on to say, yes, these were actually done in 2020 and not, these are carryovers from 2019 that we just forgot to close, but we were already done with them, right? Which is part of the reason there's this slightly manual process. So those are the 2 starting points that I would check, and for anybody else who's in the same situation, again, where I would start, but we'll follow up with you as well. And if anybody else is in the same boat, schedule the one-on-one and we'll go under the hood and look at your specific project.
Thank you. I'll try that.
Assuming, Joan, you don't want to do on the phone with 43 of your favorite friends.
Thank you.
So we had another question in the inbox earlier today around, and feel free, I think Lean is also on the call. Feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm not asking the questions right, but there's a couple questions. First, can you explain how renewable energy like PV factors into the predicted EUI, Matt?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes. How does renewable energy factor into the PEUI?
All right. Lean, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the question. Can I, just a couple of things to sort of better understand. Are we talking about projects that are energy modeled or projects that haven't been modeled?
That are modeled.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're looking for how to sort of credit renewables towards your overall EUI that you're reporting?
Yeah, so my biggest thing, I'm trying to enter the data into the DDX, and I'm just not sure that I'm entering the accurate numbers. Like I use Woofy for energy modeling, and I'm putting in the only thing that's making any significance is the electric demand, because many of the projects use electric energy. So that's the key value that I'm putting, but I'm not sure if I should put any value in renewables or should I put another value. So if you just could give me a brief about that, because I didn't attend the first session, unfortunately.
Hey, it's why we're here.
Yeah.
It's a great question, and it highlights something that is different in the DDX for folks who have used the previous tool as well. How we tackle and encourage you to account for and calculate your EUI. There are 3 ways of deriving your EUI % reduction. The first is using code equivalency. That's for projects that haven't been modeled. The second is where you already know what your EUI is, and that's inclusive of on-site renewables. In that case, you would, for predicted energy model, say, yes, the project has been modeled during this phase. You would enter your information. I don't know if we have Woofy on here. We should probably add that.
Yeah, you don't.
All right, well, we're going to select other, and then we're going to talk about adding it. It keeps coming up in conversation, so it seems like a lot of folks are using it. Anyway, select your energy, your party, and then for fuel sources, if you know just your PEY and it's inclusive again of on-site renewables, you can enter that value. And that can also be a negative number if you have a net positive project, for example.
Okay.
So that's option 2. Option 3, which I think is probably where you're closest to, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. You can also derive your PEY by entering your fuel sources.
Yes, that's how am I doing it.
Exactly. So in your case, for your fuel source, you said you're mostly using electricity, so you can go in and enter a value. We'll say it's that number. I'm not an architect, so sometimes my numbers don't make any sense. But anyway, you can enter your grid electricity, and that's going to, by default, give you a calculated predicted EUI. You're entering the units, should be the units you're seeing in an energy modeling tool. So you shouldn't have to do calculations, whereas to get to that EUI, we understand that sometimes you do. The system handles that. So for your case, if you have on-sites, you can go ahead and add the share from on-site That's also going to be in kilowatt hours, and that's going to work as a deduction from your.
Oh, okay. So it automatically deducts from it.
Yeah, so it's going to deduct from it, and it's going to give you your calculation. If you're doing fuel, so that's hopefully the answer. So then if you're do have offsite renewables, you can also include them if you're doing a fuel source itemized breakdown.
Okay. Yeah, that does answer the question. And is there any other major component that I should make sure I fill in this page? Like, other than that, I felt like maybe I'm missing on something just because I'm entering that value.
No, you're fine. So that's actually also a lot of information, right? So for folks who aren't in your situation, if you wanted to use code equivalency, you wouldn't have even had to hit that first toggle button, right? You're entering a good bit of information. That's awesome. So good for you. Okay. That is the only section at that point. It's filled in and complete. The sort of nugget where you're going to hit a bit of a rub is because in this example, I've included two offsites, one onsite, one offsite, two renewables. It's popped open this energy renewable tab, which gives you qualitative information about your selections. Did you use photovoltaic? Did you use a wind turbine? Did you, is the offsite credit providing additionality? Like, is it augmenting what's available in the grid? Is it new for this project? That's qualitative information. If you say yes, it's required, but if you don't have that information or don't want to provide that information, you can select no and it'll override it, but it will pop it open by default, but then you can just close it back.
Okay.
So it's not required. And that's true for all of these categories to begin with, right? So everything on this field, other than the design phase and the reporting date, is technically optional. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to backdate it to 12/31 because we want to come back to that one. So I'm going to save that. And then the other thing is when you go and report it at the next design phase, we had one before it, so I'm going to delete that. When you go in and you add your next design phase, if the project has been, if you're using the same energy model, you can select, all you need to do is enter your phase and your reporting date and hit save and go to project dashboard because it hasn't been done again. So you can just keep no. All of that information is still saved under yes. And will credit to the project.
Okay, so this other phase would be if I'm energy modeling in the beginning of the project and then we added new windows or new envelope and then the results changed. So that's where I use it. But if I energy modeled it at the end of the project, I just enter one.
That's correct.
One entry. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Great questions.
We have a couple of folks that have asked a question about the new bulk upload process that you alluded to, Matt, and Samuel and somebody else asked about it, Apurva. If feel free to jump in if you want him to elaborate a little bit more. But is this process changing for this year or in the future? If they're planning on using bulk upload, should they wait a couple of weeks, or what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I would encourage you to wait a couple of weeks. It'll save you a little bit of time. If you're pressed and you want to do it like right now and get it out of the way and have that sense of accomplishment, which I can relate to, go ahead and it'll be fine. You can let us know and we can do some stuff on the back end to take care of it if you're in that position and ready to go, which also good on you. I'm going to go ahead and explain it since we don't have pictures, but it should be in place in the next 2 weeks. The development team reviewed a mock-up this morning, and it seems pretty close to ready to go. But so I'd encourage waiting about 2 weeks, but if you don't feel comfortable and again want to get it knocked out, go ahead and do that. This is what to expect though. So if you do bulk upload, again, you have to be a company administrator and you'll go to the company tab. When you go to the company tab and you go down to manage projects, there's an import icon. Go ahead and click that and it will bring you to your landing page, this is how it currently works. The switch that they're making is this tile will still be here and it will say select your file, which you do by clicking on choose file. And then I'll open a dialog box for you to select from. There will also be a second box added here that will say submit your portfolio. And there'll be a checkbox and it'll say this is my entire 2020 portfolio. Or it'll say, do you want to submit? And you'll click yes. And then it will ask you to select which reporting year. So it'll be the same drop down that I showed before, and you'll select 2020. And then when you hit import, when this button turns green because you've added a correct file, it will import the information and it will submit your portfolio and return a badge to you right here. So it'll just be a one-stop shop. That should be in place in the next 2 weeks. What will be important to understand in that scenario is that the projects as they are on your spreadsheet represents the entirety of your portfolio. So in order for it to work in a meaningful way for you, you need to make sure that that file, when you go to upload it, has 100% of your projects with 100% accurate information, versus going in and adding a couple of projects via bulk upload at a time. And if you're in that situation where the project doesn't represent your entire portfolio, it's only updating 25 projects and then you're going to update 25 projects later, just don't check the box. But it should be there in 2 weeks. I hope that was clear. If it wasn't, jump on and tell me and we can talk through it. But that should be there in 2 weeks. So I'd encourage waiting if you can. If you can't, you can go ahead and upload it now and just let us know and we'll tackle it later.
Hi, Matt. This is Sam. I asked the first question about the bulk upload. So my company is planning on submitting via bulk upload. What I'm wondering is, say we do submit this way, and then we realize, oh, there's an extra project we need to add or something along those lines. Is there a way that we could go back and add that in, or would we just re-upload the document, or?
Yeah, re-upload the document with that new project added. It'll take all of your records. If all of your other fields are the same, it should just save over that record.
It'll overwrite it?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
And if it doesn't, email us and let us know, and we'll hop on with our development team, which is unfortunately all too often my answer. But it should just override the project. So I would recommend, if you find yourself in that situation, adding that project to your spreadsheet as you had entered it, and then resubmitting or uploading the whole thing.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Awesome.
Intense things.
Hi, I'm Apurva. I asked the question about the bulk upload too. I was wondering, what do I do if I had previously a couple of projects which were in SD phase, and now they have moved on to the next phase. So if I bulk upload them, then will they be duplicated, or will they automatically change phase?
That's a great question, Apurva. So the most important piece of information that you're going to need is your project number. The project number is by default auto-generated through the system, but you can override it. Since you have projects that were already in the system and migrated, they already have our project number, whether we created it or you created it. If your project number matches and you're uploading it for the same company, which you will because of who you work for, so long as your project number is the same, it will update that information. To submit the form, you do need all of the project information for that project. So you will need like name, location, use type, etc. Have you bulk uploaded in the past, or is this your first time bulk uploading?
I have bulk uploaded in the past, yeah.
Okay, so then you have the information. So that's sort of helpful. So long as that project number matches, it will bring in the information, but you'll need to account for them on your form in your Excel spreadsheet. What won't happen, to be explicit, is if you had a project that was in schematic design back in 2019 and it has not advanced for some reason, it's still in schematic design a year later, which I guess sometimes happens. If it's not on your spreadsheet in the workflow I just described, and sorry that you can't see it, but it will not pick up that project. It will only include the projects on your portfolio spreadsheet. So your pathways are either, yes, my spreadsheet is accurate, or, like completely, or it's, I'm gonna manually toggle on and off my projects, which 6 of one, a half dozen of the other. And again, if you have questions, we can hop on a one-on-one and work through it together.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I do have one follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
So is it possible to edit a particular project after doing a bulk upload, or is that not an option?
Yeah, so you can always go in and edit the project manually. You'll edit the same way that you that I showed earlier by going into the project and then going down and finding your design phase and clicking the 3 icons to edit it. That won't change the portfolio submission though. So again, that's not true, sorry. Nuance there. So it will, I will make a note of this and follow up on the Basecamp site, which is a great opportunity to note that we do have a Basecamp site, a peer-to-peer network, and I can add you all. I want to confirm with my developers for the expected behavior. I believe if you change the project after you've bulk uploaded it, it will reflect your revision in the reports tab, but it would still, of course, be wrong in the CSV that's been saved down in your library, if that makes sense. But I believe if in that case, you just wanted to update that one project and have it be accurate in your reports tab, I believe it will do that, but I will confirm with our developers.
Okay, thank you so much.
Someone asked about a recording. This will be recorded. This session will be added to the YouTube page. Hopefully by tomorrow, the first session is already on the YouTube page. So feel free to check that out if you missed it. We have a couple of questions. Well, let's start with Matt, is there a way to update a project status, so active, on hold, complete, or canceled, from the portfolio page instead of having to go into the individual project?
Not currently, but it's a great suggestion. I'll make a note of it.
And so
there is, sorry, quickly. Sorry, never mind. I thought we had that on the managed projects page. We don't. Again, it's a great suggestion. I'll make a note of it. Can I also add though, for feedback like that, which is super helpful, here's a great forum. You can always email it to 2030commitment@ai.org. But while you're using the tool, there's also a red feedback icon that pops up sort of on every page. You can always go in and click it. There's a sort of a 5-point scale of how it's going. You can write that note, and it's a great place to add features like, I'm on this page and what I would love for it to do is X. We document those and those go into the backlog, which we review with our developers regularly. You can also take a picture of specific elements on the page. So if you're referring to, just the managed projects tile or just the search tile, I don't know if you guys can see, but it's graying out the screen, and then there's a white box with a yellow dotted line around it that you can click on, and it will add that as an image into your feedback so that when we and then the developers are reviewing your feedback recommendations, they're also seeing it in the context of the pictures or what you saw. So an opportunity to highlight that, but I have made a note of the suggestion to edit your project status from the portfolio submission page.
Great. And then, so we have Emily can't edit the date reported on her project. Can you walk us through that again? And is there a limitation? Is it only employees or admin that can change data, or is everyone supposed to be able to do that?
Yeah, that may be a bug. So I'd like to follow up with you offline as well. But when you go into your project level, anybody who is a member of your company, whether they're an employee or an admin, should be able to edit project design data unless they've been added as a collaborator with read-only access, which is not likely. To change that data, you should, I picked a winner of a project because it's not letting me do it either. Again, live. So you may need to refresh, but you should, assuming everything is working correctly on your end, and again, there might be a bug, so we'll follow up directly. But you can click on the 3 icons next to the project and then either edit or delete the design phase. So we'll click edit. When you go in, this is all of the information and the date. To change the date, click on it and set the appropriate date, hit save and go to project dashboard. And in this case, that construction documents from 12:30 now shows 12:30 or 12:23.
Hey, Matt, this is Emily. So when I click on those dots, it's just taking me to what it's calling step 3 of 3, set a target. And it won't let me kind of go backward or anything. So if this is a bug and something we can work through, I would definitely love to set up one of those 20-minute sessions. I've encountered a couple other issues that might be my error, but I would love to talk through.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that. And we'll drop a link in the chat as soon as we get a chance, or Paula, if you have a chance before I do. Quick question. When you go to the company tab, and I don't know if everybody does this, but I'm literally pointing at my screen right now, which is not helpful. If you go to the company tab and you find that project, if the action, in your case, I would suspect is going to be yellow and say like finish setup or set a target. And what that's saying is for some reason, a target hasn't been set. So from that main manage projects tile, you can hit edit project and go in. And then going to page 3 for 3, just assuming that your target is the generic 80% reduction or 25 for interiors, just click on the box that says PEUI and hit save and view project, and that should do it. If it's taking you that 3rd page, it just means for some reason there's not a target associated with that project. That could be if the project was imported through an API.
Well, these were the bulk upload projects.
Interesting. So it may be there to the so that's probably it, but we'll look into that because that also shouldn't have happened, but we'll follow up with you separately. But if that happens and anybody ends up on that situation where it's like, hey, set a target, you can just click on that one box and it'll check it. It does require a manual action, or you can set a custom target, which is great if you know your project is going to be net zero and you want to make sure that you're communicating that to your team. And also so that it shows up in this tile block up here. We've had a number of folks talk about how they'll take a screenshot of this and put it in like an awards application or send it to a client or a project team. So it's a way of just documenting the target here.
I have a question follow up on the previous one. When we're trying to change the status of the project, like if we enter the project and press edit, it's the project status is grayed out. Like we cannot change it there.
So we had our developers look at it this morning, and I believe, and we had them, there was a bug where the project was only letting you hit complete specifically if the project had been through construction administration. They either this morning pushed a fix for that, or we'll be doing that later this week. So in this case, I'm not sure the last time you used the tool. In this case, this project has been through construction documents and is now letting me mark it as complete. And whenever you are able to click complete, it'll ask you to just confirm that your basic information is the same. The reason it does this is because usually when you set up a project, some time passes before you go in and mark the project complete. So just making sure that that upfront information was correct. So clicking those and submit.
If I had it before set as complete and I want to change it into active, like by mistake, I've put it as complete. How can I change that if it's grayed out?
So active should not be grayed out, but on hold and canceled are. If you marked it can't complete but want to mark it canceled, you first need to mark it active. So you can go from active to any design phase, but you can only go from complete back to active.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Hopefully that helps. And
Gotcha. Yeah. Yes. Yes. No, thank you. I got it.
Speaking of complete projects, Gavin asked what the best milestone to know when to mark a project complete. What does that even mean?
What does that even mean? That's a great question. And the answer is it sort of varies for every firm. Ideally, the project would be going through construction administration. Perhaps when you get like your certificate of occupancy, you would mark it complete and keep it pushing. For some firms, they consider a project complete when it reaches construction administration. That's okay too. So in that workflow, you log your CA phase and then hit project complete. And then for other projects, and I'm going to get this one wrong, but I was working with a firm the other week and they were telling me about bridging documents, that they were doing a bridging set. And so their period of work did not extend through construction. And so their project for them was complete when their contract and scope of work was complete. And so they just marked it there. Kind of a vague answer. If it was too vague, go ahead and hop on mic and help me work through it.
Okay, I think it was just vague enough, Matt. So we have a question, we get this question a lot, but we have a question on best practices for multi-building, multi-family projects. So do folks average the units per building and then average all the buildings? Like what is best practice, if there is any, around something like that?
William, is this like a development with multiple buildings?
Yes. So the question, I mean, in our firm, we have multiple multifamily project in one project. We have multifamily elevator buildings, we have garden apartments, we have townhomes, and sometimes we have a mix of all three on one site. And so do we do that at the building level, at the project level? How do we aggregate these? Then of course, even when an apartment building will have common space and unit space, a garden apartment will not. So we're just trying to figure out, we're only allowed to put in one number, but I don't know which one to put in.
Yeah, I have a couple of initial conflicting thoughts, but I'm curious if others on the call have found themselves in that situation. We'll try doing a real-time peer-to-peer Basecamp moment. Anybody on the call have an answer for
Allison?
Hi. Yeah.
I think last time you also answered
yeah, I love answering questions. So we do a lot of senior living projects, and the way we kind of try to think of it is like if you have a different building footprint with like a different energy system, the energy model might have not been done that way, but or you may have not had an energy model, but you really should treat them as separate entries in DDX. You know, if you have townhouses, a row of 10 townhouses that are falling under the residential code next to a common building that has occupied space and like a pool, those should be two separate entries, maybe with using sub numbers or something like that. I'm curious if anyone else does something similar. It does get really confusing when you're doing kind of a big project under one client and usually one project team, but in DDX, splitting them up really helps make it super clear.
Okay. That does make sense. And we're willing to go with that. We're trying to find the right precedent.
Yeah, we tend to do the exact same thing where we treat in DDX, every building is its own project, no matter what the condition, so that you're kind of looking at, especially because like we typically do energy models per building because you have a whole different envelope and a different volume to wall ratio. And so we look at everything inside of that envelope as the building. So to your point, for the townhome versus multifamily, we include amenity space and all that in the building use. You can kind of break it up. So we do a lot of mixed use as well. So we will do retail and we'll mix the use up in the reporting. But we do tend to report it as each building as a single project.
Sorry, did you say you kind of average or aggregate the units plus the common space?
Correct. So we use all of the building area because we really look at what's the total building use divided by the total square foot of the building is what we are reporting in the end. So, you know, whether or not that data is coming in by unit, each unit has a different size, and we'll use different energy uses, but we kind of look at the total building use and the total building square footage.
So we, I guess we've shown a little of our process here, but you know, our units are getting our HERS rating, you know, and we work from there. But oftentimes our common space is not modeled, and you know, we're getting a pushback. You know, we just have to work into our contracts for one. On the one hand, that's just better contracts. But do you guys have any tips for estimating that common space or talking with the consultants to get that modeled when they're not required to do so?
I was curious if your energy was coming back in a HERS model, because I remember last year was the first year we reported, and I was scouring Basecamp to figure out how to take a HERS model in energy input and put it into this format. I did not find an answer, so I'm still curious if anyone else did. So what we ended up doing is we went back to energy modelers and tried to get a sense of, because like you could do one of two things. Like you could either use the HERS model, kind of get a per unit EUI, because every unit's going to have a different square footage. So get a per unit EUI and kind of figure out what the building average based on that, and kind of assume the load, like just use that as like this is as good as we're going to get. But we moved to including in our contracts a request that in addition to any reporting that they at PEUI and the LPD is reported.
Got it. Okay.
But does anyone else know what to do with the HERS model? Because I 100% wondered about that too.
Maybe that's something that we can ask some of the other members that we work with and see if we can find an answer and post it to Basecamp for you all.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I would be curious. I'll watch for that too.
Great. Okay, so this next question starts with, I'm from California, and those always make me nervous, but Matt is answering the questions today. So Matt, Catherine is from California, and she has access to the CF1R-PRF-01 forms from the Energy Pro 8.2, right? And in the past, they've directed people to review the PRF1 report to find, oh man, can you see the question, Matt? And Catherine, feel free to jump in here. I think the crux of it is that she can't find the unit that she's looking for in her form. And I don't know if others from California are on here and can speak to this.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the forms have changed since 2019, because there's a helpful like tutorial how to like just reference table U and the PRF1, and like there is no table U on the PRF ones I'm looking at.
There are threads of this that sound familiar, but like Paula, every time there's a I'm in California question, I hold my breath for a moment. This is one of those. I'm curious if we can connect you with some folks in California who have been doing work on the space who can probably answer the question, but like our last one, I would punt it back out to the group. Are there folks who are dealing with Title 24 in California paperwork and trying to bring it into DDX and have the forms changed in 2019? And if so, how are you working around them? Because Catherine, I think that's really your question, right?
Yeah, I mean, we got tons of TDV energy data, but that's pretty worthless. So yeah. Yeah, okay, well, I think that's fine. I'm probably just gonna push back on fortunately the project has a modeler, an energy modeler, and so and they do lead, so ideally they will be able to get us the EAP too, and that'll probably put an end to it.
We'll make a connection offline to some folks who might be able to help. Sorry about that. And if anybody else has any other thoughts, you can absolutely drop them in the chat or post them onto Basecamp. We'll drop a link for Basecamp into the chat. You do have to be added. So if you have not already been added, or if you're not sure if you've been added to the Basecamp site, let us know at 2030commitment@ai.org, and Paula or I will add you. We'll be in the inbox this afternoon. So it's a great sort of multitask moment. If you're on this call right now and you're like, this is helpful, I'd like to do this again in the future, drop that email and we'll get you added tonight. Brian, I see a question from you around projects that don't have energy model and adjusting the target. Can you talk me through your question a little bit?
Yes. So if we are manually entering some projects into DDX without them having been modeled like in Cove Tool, and we're entering the data, and we know those projects were meeting the energy code maybe a little bit slightly better, instead of having it just default to 80%, which won't be totally accurate, can we modify that?
Yeah, so we'll go in and show a project. So we'll use this 2 Quail Street project. So in this case, the project was, I'm going to pull a project that hasn't been modeled. I just create a project. We're going to create a project today. So for anybody who wants to know how to create a project, we're going to get a super quick tutorial. So earlier I did mention the firm number. This becomes, again, really important for if you're doing bulk uploads. So if you are a bulk upload firm, but for some reason you are adding a project here and you want to match your database, you can customize it. Lots of decimal points that I see when I talk to firms who have their own database system. Otherwise, it'll have a value. So we'll do non-residential, new construction. And just a quick note that IP is generally what folks are going to use. That's inch pound versus international standard. When you go to set your extended project information, occupancy year and code are required. And that code is in this case relevant because the code is what's pulling the equivalency. But occupants and costs are completely optional research-based fields. Enter multifamily. When you enter your square footage, your project will pull in a baseline per use type area, as well as a target, which is based on the 2030. And then the baseline value down here is based on Zero Tool, or for an international project, the US national average. And it is a weighted baseline for all of your use types, but you can also submit a custom baseline. We'll hit save and continue. So ostensibly, Brian, if you were, to get back to your question, if you're designing a building and you know it's going to be like 10% better than code, you could set that as a target to like convey to your team if you know what that like EUI value is by entering it. So you could enter that PEY value here, I'm saying 16.6, and it'll show you that that's about a 61% return. That'll document it sort of for your for yourself and for your team, but it won't affect your percentage reduction calculations in terms of how you report and score the project. But that will update this icon up here to say that your project target, what the value is against your EUI, or against what the 2030 target is. So you can see those numbers. At the end of the day though, you can't score, you can't have an EUI value or a percent reduction that is better than code if you're not modeling. So if you're in a situation where you anticipate that the project is going to be 10% better than code, that's awesome. But this system and the sort of accounting rules of the 2030 commitment don't account for that unless you have the energy model. But that process I just showed you is how you would be able to at least document that your target EUI is not the full 80%, but it's also not just like code equivalent. Does that sort of answer your question, or did I misunderstand it?
No, you answered it, but so this is our first year reporting. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to align this with our sustainable action plan, where mm-hmm. we're trying to be modest and maybe try to improve our EUI reductions, say by 10% every 5 years. Mm-hmm. And so internally, it may be a goal to kind of keep inching up 50%, 60%, 70%. Mm-hmm. But if we don't model a project in Cove Tool and the default baseline, as you just showed us, will show an 80% reduction. What you're saying is for any project that we do not model, it won't actually record that 80% EUI in the final report, right? It'll just take the 49% that is what meets code automatically. Is that correct?
I believe so, if I, again, understood the question.
Because
at the end of the day,
I didn't want to.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, our first time reporting, I was getting nervous that it was going to be really off from reality, because we are not that extreme with an 80% reduction. I mean, we're meeting code. So when I kept seeing the 80% default, I was telling my staff to keep changing that to 49%, because for projects we're not modeling, if it's just meeting code, it's going to be 49%.
Got it. So yeah, for your projects that aren't modeling, the EUI will be the code equivalent. So if you're designing to be about 10% better and you're just sort of shooting for that internally and how you talk about it with your teams, it means your overall portfolio as you submit it might actually be a little bit deflated, but not substantially. So in that case, when they're going to set the target, just to document it so you don't have like that moment of panic, you can absolutely set it down. The other thing I want to highlight, and you may already do this, when you go to your company view, and thanks, Sarah, for the assist. Sarah spends a lot of time hearing from me. So you can always go in on your company profile if you're an administrator and click the pencil icon, and you can set a custom energy savings target for your firm. So it sounds like you're in a situation where you guys are just starting, you know that there's a learning curve, which is super common and commendable, and like, thank you for tackling it. And you know that 80% is like really daunting. So you could say that, look, we're gonna shoot for like 55% across the firm. And you can enter that as a value and hit save. When you go back to that project, So we said it was the Crystal Gardens project, and you go in and look at that project information. Sorry, just trying to see my screen. And you come onto this page, there's this icon or this graph on the bottom. By default, it's going to show you, the use types that you've already selected for your project across the entire DDX. So not just your firm, but all firms who have submitted a residential mid-rise project. You're going to see a pretty wide range because there's a huge range in the thousands of projects in the system. But I mostly encourage folks to look toward this sort of median, the white bar in the middle of the green. That's where 50% of the projects are above and 50% are below. It's like right in the middle. But there's also this custom company target. So you can see sort of how close you are. It's showing your code equivalent based on what you picked. So I picked IEC, I think 2018, which is 49% reduction. So you're seeing that, and then you're seeing how far your company is versus that 2030 target. And being at 55% for the spirit of the entire DDX actually puts you in pretty good company. So that's another way where you can set it, and then anybody from your company who's in the DDX will see that custom company target, which is specific to you. And again, you can set that through the company tab.
Thank you. That's a great feature. Just real quick again, where did you set that custom?
I go quickly. For a kid from Iowa, I talk not like a kid from Iowa. So when you go in to your company tab, there's a pencil icon down here at the bottom that lets you edit your information. It's also, you will have to make sure the form is complete. So when we migrated the system, a lot of folks, for example, and you're newer, so this doesn't necessarily apply, but when we migrated the system, a lot of folks didn't have like a URL address, for example. And that's something we're pushing toward to build our directory. It will require all of these fields except for the energy savings target. That is optional and only for situations like the one you're describing, where you're trying to do something where you've set a plan for your firm in place and you want to be transparent about that with your team members.
Okay, great. I just did it. Thank you.
Awesome. Solving problems in real time.
We are over time, so I'm going to let all of you go, but this has been great. I loved all the engagement we got today, and we're hoping that y'all will join us on April 13th as well. There are a couple of questions that you guys have sent. If you could please send those to the 2030commitment@aia.org inbox, we will get those answers to you. And if you'd like to set up an appointment with us, please feel free to do so. I keep telling everyone that maybe don't do it, like don't try to set it up a week before reporting, because it might be harder to get an appointment then. But feel free to set one of those up. And thanks, Matt.
It was fun. And thank you all for everything you're doing. We realize a lot of hard work goes in on your end. So if there's absolutely anything we can do, don't hesitate to reach out. Paola and I are here to help you be successful.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everyone.